I've always been an entrepreneur because I, was Mr. Ideas guy, so that the firm can be more successful in 5 years when I'm gone.
Right.
We've thrown a few yacht parties, and
We are back with the What You're About podcast with me, Chad Abood. And this is a really, really fun episode because we've got a first in-person recording with Brett Colvin, CEO and founder of Good Lawyer. But the other cool thing is, this is a collab season with Good Lawyer and the What You're About podcast. And so, we couldn't have a better person than the idea man behind the business that is disrupting legal at an incredibly rapid pace. So, for all my friends out there, anyone that knows me is already going to know Brett. He's everywhere on the internets. And so you'll know the Good Lawyer story. But, for the few folks that might not know, the thing that I really resonated with Good Lawyer when we first, met maybe a year or so ago is that I deeply care about two things for the legal industry. One is that lawyers should be able to know and feel their most natural gifts, and they should be able to bring them into their career in the easiest way possible. That should be a real thing. And then when I think about Good Lawyer, this is what you're doing for lawyers. You are making it the most exciting and fun place for lawyers to practice because they can do it in a way that suits their life. However many days they want to work, different companies they want to work with, they can take care of their kids, take care of their parents, they can travel, all this beautiful stuff that is not really possible in the traditional model. And so, and then you give companies access to that talent in a way that they otherwise wouldn't get it. And so when we started talking about how you were disrupting the industry that way, it just really resonated with what I really want for lawyers. And so, couldn't be a better person for this episode and to be the first one to do it live. So thank you, my friend, for sharing your time.
well, my friend Chad, it is a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the incredibly nice intro. And rest assured, I might be one of the ideas guys behind the scene, and certainly a very persistent entrepreneur. But by no means can I take all the credit for coming up with Good Lawyer, and certainly its evolution over the last 5 years. And there's an incredible team behind the scenes, full of lawyers, designers, developers, operations, and just a lot of folks working hard every day to build a future of law that I think is going to fit businesses and, even more importantly, good lawyers better than a lot of the alternatives, or at least provide an option that didn't exist before. So it is a pleasure to be here, my friend, and I'm excited to hear some of the hard probing questions you got for me today.
Well, let's get into it straight away. I mean, folks know you and feel your presence when they meet you online. Very, excited, passionate, confident, outgoing about the mission. But, when you build something and you take it from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, there's a lot of struggle and friction and question marks along the way. And so, deeply curious for everyone, lawyers out here looking to maybe move out of the traditional path, or other entrepreneurs listening to this, like, what has been the scariest thing about stepping out of the partnership path at a national law firm to build something? Like, what was the thing or the moment when you thought to yourself, like, whoa, what did I just do?
I think the scarier thing for me, kind of throughout my time in the big firm, the scariest thing for me was the possibility of, that life being forever. And, for me, I had a great experience in the firm. I learned a ton, but ultimately, once I sort of, found my feet and figured out how things worked, and, felt competent and wasn't, freaked out about whether I was doing a good job, I kind of, after about 4 years, knew what I was doing and understood how things operated. The scariest thing for me was imagining that was it, that, my day-to-day as a fourth year associate was going to look a lot like my day-to-day as a 20-year partner.
Yeah.
And as much as I respected a lot of the senior folks around me that, taught me the tricks of the trade and, helped me, I like to think, become a good lawyer at that point in time. I really struggled to look up to any of them from a sort of, I want to be there.
Right.
That's the destination I'm looking for down the road.
Yeah. It wasn't your next phase.
No. And I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur and I've always had a passion for business.
Yeah.
And you can chase a little bit of that in the firm, when you start building a book of business and that kind of thing. But ultimately, you are really kind of confined into a very predetermined box that never felt quite right for me.
I love that. Like, for folks that have heard, my version of this before, I also worked at a national law firm. I also had that moment around the same stage where it didn't feel like the thing that I was going to do next. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I know I want to talk about grandma's basement and how you figured out Good Lawyer, but I didn't know what my thing was going to be, but I do remember thinking it's not going to be this. And I remember telling one of the partners on one of my kind of last conversation meetings when I was saying, hey, I'm leaving to travel the world for 6 months. I remember saying to them, I know that if I don't build my own dream, I'll just be building someone else's. And, similarly to what you said, that part was too scary for me. And that was like the drive that said, well, you got to go figure it out because that life wasn't going to work for me. And so when you made the decision, what was the next thing? Did you go straight to grandma's basement and start grinding, or were you like kind of pre-planning? Was there a transition of like, I think it's going to be something like this to disrupt legal? Or could you have easily gone back? I know you run painting franchises before. Could it have easily have been that, or was it always going to be disrupt legal?
I mean, the painting franchise piece is funny. I like I said a minute ago, I've always been a little entrepreneur. Started selling golf balls out of my uncle's backyard. He was on the 15th hole, started selling golf balls when I was like 4. My little brother would find them. I would be slanging them for toonies. And then, ran some little contracting businesses, through junior high and high school. But the painting franchise was the first like real business where, I had payroll and we had a team and it was growing and we were dealing with way bigger numbers than I'd ever, experienced before in the business context. And that was when I really knew that at some point down the road, I had to run a business again.
Yeah, that feeling sounded like it was just burning in you once you felt it.
I just loved it so much. And, my dad passed away and he was pushing law school and I wasn't quite ready for the real world. And, I was pretty good at school and it kept mom happy. So I went to law school without really thinking about it that much. And, you get wrapped up in on-campus interviews and, next thing I knew, without really making a lot of decisions along the way, like really conscious, thoughtful decisions, just kind of going with the flow. Next thing I land at a national law firm. I'm articling, and again, it's just like
you're in the river.
Yeah,
like flowing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, there's no time to reflect or think. Yeah. And it was really when I went on secondment to a big financial institution out here in Vancouver, where we're shooting today, pre-yacht party, where my first week, my boss came up to me on secondment, important client of the firm, and he said, Brett, slow down.
Wow.
Not because I was like rushing through and doing a bad job, but because I was so accustomed to working at such a pace and in that in-house environment, I was bumping into walls all the time because even in the first week, just because the pace was so much slower.
What did you make of that when he said that to you? Was it confused? Was it like eye-opening? What did you think?
It was a little confusing at first for sure. But quickly, I accepted it. And what ended up happening was, I started working for that year in Vancouver, which was about my 3rd year in practice, more like a 9 to 5, maybe a 9 to 6, but opening up all this other time in my day and more importantly in my brain where I, had the opportunity just to start thinking about some other things.
Right.
And, I bought this Good Lawyer domain years before in first year law school, just on a whim. And it was, at the time when I was on that secondment, taking the train every day, listening to startup podcasts, like How I Built This, which I'm sure you've heard, Guy Raz. And it was really those train rides and then some of those evenings that had all of a sudden freed up where, maybe this Good Lawyer thing isn't going to be a law firm I run one day. Maybe there's a bigger opportunity, something more interesting and impactful that, sort of took some of these startup concepts I was starting to wrap my head around and applying them to this massive fragmented industry that we know in law.
Yeah.
And it was really that time on secondment and then coming back, getting back into the grind at the firm.
That must have been a bit jarring when you came back after a year, or did you fall right back into it?
Maybe it was jarring for a couple days, but no, very quickly just fell back into it. And I had a really good thing going with a lawyer that was a little senior to me, Nolan Ritzel. He's one of our top good lawyers now, which is hilarious and full circle. But he was really like one of the most important mentors for me at the firm. And so when I got back, I kind of fell back into it. But the other piece of the puzzle was this feeling of frustration I had consistently because I, was Mr. Ideas guy, which, people kind of joked about and was not really a compliment in the firm context. But I was sharing these thoughts and ideas constantly, and not just when I got back, but the whole time. And it was really this sort of two-sided sort of coin or problem, whatever you want to think, where on the one hand, the ideas for what Good Lawyer could look like started to percolate on secondment, and then, it still kept percolating a bit when I got back. But it was that coupled with the fact that any of the ideas or innovations that I was suggesting internally within the firm to make us better, like providing an incentive for mentorship, or how do you motivate somebody on secondment, because what's like their job for the firm on secondment, a few of these things. And ultimately it was one of my senior partners in my group, basically my boss, who I know was in his mind looking out for me, but again, he had the view that what he had was what I wanted, and that was just totally wrong. And I'll never forget him coming into my office one day, slamming the door and saying, "Brett, keep coming up with your ideas, just keep them to yourself."
Right.
And it was really,
that must have been like a big moment for you.
Yeah. Like not listening or executing on the ideas was one thing, but now that I felt like I was, being muzzled and I couldn't even share the ideas, that was sort of the final straw for me. So that's when I got serious about thinking about how to depart and what was next. And, fortunately was able to, over the next 6 months, meet some incredible co-founders, Tom, Parker, Grant, and raise a little bit of, initial seed capital from an entrepreneur in Calgary who I've known for a long time. And those things coalesced, and about 6 months later, took the leap. And February 2019, we started Good Lawyer, and I've never looked back.
That's amazing, man. 5.5 years. And, I know that the journey has been interesting because it started out, as a marketplace play where, you're thinking, I guess we're going to be the Uber or Airbnb of legal services now. And so you create this marketplace and you build the tech behind it, and you're connecting startups to lawyers who can have a direct kind of contract to provide advice or whatever work needed to be done. But then it iterated after a couple of years. And this is, I think, something that I'm really curious about how you thought about it, because what I find about in legal training is there's like one right answer and you have to know it. And then you just drive towards it no matter what other data points or information comes to you. When life and business it's not like that. When you look back at your life, you think maybe, okay, that's the outcome I'm going for, but life always has these moves. But legal training doesn't really encourage that, I find. And so for you, you built this thing, you've taken this massive leap, you took the money, you built a marketplace. It probably sounded very cool to say the Airbnb of legal services.
It did.
And then you do it for a couple of years, and then it switches more towards fractional in-house lawyers, fractional general counsels, which is now the bread and butter of the business, but it wasn't at one time. And so how did you feel when you had built this thing for 2 years with developers, people who, care about building this tech product, and then you're like, this is still important, but it might not be the only outcome of this business? Was that frustrating? Was it scary? Or
no, not really. Because I think for two reasons. One, Good Lawyer, from the day we launched it in 2020, right before COVID, at that time, we offered $39 advice sessions and $25 per page contract reviews. And it consistently iterated and evolved every year.
Yeah.
And, at a much quicker pace than annually. So I do think that we had this sort of muscle or understanding that the business would continue to iterate and evolve, whether it was going from those micro legal services into larger fixed fee bundles and projects, really getting and going deep with the startups. So I was very okay and comfortable with that continuous evolution. The really interesting thing about fractional was how directly it tied to what our users were asking or demanding from us. And so, when we first started doing these monthly package deals for more lawyer, because that's really what these really successful startups that we're starting to look more like scale-ups,
more dedicated lawyer, more focused time.
Getting the fixed fee quote when they had contracts flying out on a daily, weekly basis was becoming cumbersome.
Right.
And so having more lawyer in a slightly different way was really important to these clients. And so, beginning to package those up, and at that time, I just called them custom monthly deals. But that really was a direct sort of ask from our customers. And from there, started hanging out with, some of these fractional CFO guys. And all of a sudden, one day it clicked. I'm like, oh my God, we're selling fractional GC.
Yeah.
And then again, with moving even further up market into the enterprise with fractional in-house, it has just been this consistent evolution. And, I think there's a lot of narrative and stories about startup pivots. And some people could perhaps view our move into fractional as a pivot, but I don't really view it that way. It feels much more like a gradual evolution.
Right.
And this is just one of those moments in the evolution that was really important.
Yeah.
When the Homo sapiens stood erect and started walking around, that was a really important evolutionary moment in time. And for us, it's the same with fractional. It was this really critical evolution, not only because it allowed us to serve these larger and more sophisticated businesses in a new way with much larger sort of average mandate sizes, which is good for the health of our business, but also because it was a total game changer for the most important sort of stakeholders in our world, which are the lawyers.
Yeah. It gives them like a little bit more opportunities, some certainty if they wanted it for like the longer projects, a little bit deeper ingrained in a business, which so many lawyers really love to do. I think the one piece that you really touched on there that I think is cool, because it's cool. You see it in tech a lot. The best tech companies do this, but I think the legal industry has been slower to adopt it, which is listening to the customer feedback, asking for it, listening to it, assessing how you can bring it into your business in the fastest, most efficient way to test if it works.
Totally.
Because when I was a GC of a tech portfolio, that was a big part of the equation, which is our product team building this product because we think it's a good idea, or are we building it based on what our best, customer segment really wants from the product, separate from whether, us being inside the woods and tinkering thinks it's the right thing to do. And that's what you did. Was that just natural from running a painting business before? Or like, how did it come to you? Or was it just the desire to grow and you're getting enough feedback to say, hey, we want to grow this way? Because a lot of lawyers feel very like stuck in a model they're given.
Well, I mean, I think ultimately it's just, and again, it's not just me, but having this, very sort of human-centric problem-solving approach or attitude. And, just in contrast to my experience in the firm, the most frustrating feedback or sort of counter argument I got all the time when I was pushing for these like little micro innovations was, well, we don't want to do it that way. And I would push, why not? And the answer I got consistently was, well, because we've always done it this other way.
Right.
We've always done it this way. Why fix it if it ain't broke?
Right.
And I mean, I was making the argument that in a lot of ways it was broke.
Yeah.
But that was consistently the feeling. And I think that, again, kind of ties back to just the risk aversion in our industry. Generally speaking, I would say lawyers definitely fall into the, less risky camp. And that gets exacerbated when you have a business structure where, you don't actually, as a partner in a law firm, you don't really own anything.
Right.
You don't own a piece of a building or a company. It's much more like having a lease, a right to these profits over the duration of your lease. And the problem with that, and why I think there's so little innovation, is the incentives are broken such that the folks with the least time left on their lease are in all of the decision making positions.
They might not have the longer term view.
No. And like, just from a self-interest perspective, why would I invest my money today?
Right.
My profits that I have, a right to today, so that the firm can be more successful in 5 years when I'm gone.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that is a major, major difference between what Good Lawyer is focusing on and, what the traditional model has been given, which is really focused on just satisfying whatever demand a company wants of the talent without really thinking about what's going to be the most engaging, retention focused, efficient model for the talent to work in. So they feel good. Is that this is the thing that I think Good Lawyer has done such a great job of, is really focused on the talent. Because, when I explain the model to people, yes, you have to have the companies paying for their services. Otherwise there's no business. But a millisecond after you have the companies saying they want fractional legal services, you've got to have not just a quantity of lawyers, but like an engaged, excited, passionate quality of talent. And so when you think about kind of Good Lawyer's evolution there and the future of where it's going, how do you think about how Good Lawyer sees the talent that's in the roster, how it's growing, where it's going? What's your view on that?
Oh, that's a great question, man. So when we started Good Lawyer, 5 years ago, launched it in 2020, I was really focused on driving extreme value for entrepreneurs, and especially on, the early stage, don't have access to high quality legal services entrepreneurs. And, that is still and will always be a passion of mine, because I think, even more than I identify as a lawyer, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 4. And I just love entrepreneurship and understand those struggles so well now. So that's always going to be a huge piece of me, and what I hope Good Lawyer can provide is this greater accessibility. But what has really struck me and really sort of expanded in my mind over the last several years is our Good Lawyers are entrepreneurs too. And the fact that we can facilitate and help support them on the business of law and let them really focus and hone in on the practice.
Yeah.
That has been, I think, one of our biggest levers to date. And what has happened since those very early days when I was the first Good Lawyer, thank God I'm not anymore, because the talent we have is a hell of a lot better than me, to today, is just continuing to double down on that talent, on, their experience and engagement. Pauline Chan has been, which I think she was on an earlier podcast of yours, has been a huge game changer in that world. And, it has moved so much in our business, that focus on talent, that the mission that, we sort of recrafted at the beginning of this year is, Good Lawyer wants to be the most desirable way to practice law.
Right.
And the way that I tie that back to the business and our growth is just this simple recognition, again, as we've moved up market and started serving more sophisticated clients, is that if we win the talent, like the top talent in the space that we play in this fractional in-house space, we win the game.
Yeah.
Because our economics and our model drive efficiencies, drive way better value. And really the crux of everything is, can we attract the best lawyers in Canada, across North America, in the world? Not all of them, but the ones that want to practice in this different way that didn't really exist before.
Right. Yeah. I think there's like some really nice pieces there, because you can do this in a few different ways too. So if you think about lawyers who are operating a solo law firm, they may have always been in a solo law firm, or they may have left a law firm, or they may have left in-house. Almost no matter how they got there can be a feeling of isolation. And it can be scary. Like, how do I set this up? There's all the administration, there's the logistics, there's finding business. There's also like, you don't have the same referral when you first started as walking down the hall and talking to somebody. And so there's a massive human element of like the community building that really supports your work and makes you feel like you're a part of something larger. And then there's all kinds of other kind of back end benefits of like discounted technology and, other ways. And so when you think about how are you trying to drive this feeling of this is financially lucrative, this is building a community around me, this is something where I can meet people in real life, I can get real-time responses. Like, what are some of the methods and modes that you're really thinking about now and for this next phase of Good Lawyer to bring the best talent to you?
Totally. So I think, there's more pillars than this, but just to, keep it sort of a little bit more condensed, I'll talk about three. First and foremost, it has to be lucrative and fair from an economic or financial perspective. Mm-hmm. And, in contrast to when I was associate at a big firm, keeping 15 to maybe 20% of my billable rate and putting that in my pocket, which is a number that I feel like more lawyers should try to run that.
Yeah, nobody knows that number. Yeah.
It's not hard to get. And just flipping that on its head. So the lawyer's keeping 80+% of, their billable or the amount that they're, we're charging a client and ensuring that, they are taking what I consider to be sort of a fair proportion and a significant one. I
think we should pause on that and just like help people think about the math, because to be honest, like I thought about it top line, but I didn't actually do the math when I was an associate. Like if you look at the amount of hours that you have billed or worked or captured, and then you think about the amount of money you were paid to do that work, you can get to the number.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's funny too, because I can reflect on my own experience with the associate math, but I've also spoken with, former and current partners of large national, international firms. And it's funny that the math isn't that different. As an associate, billing out at, call it $500 an hour as a fourth or fifth year associate before I left, and putting $65, $70 in my pocket. Talking to a senior partner, towards the very end of his career, billing out at $800, $900 an hour in Calgary. If he was in Toronto, it would probably be more than that. And him putting $200 to $250 in his pocket.
Right.
Which is again, $200 to $250 an hour in your pocket. Like that's good money. And if you extrapolate that over a busy year, like you can make a great salary plus bonuses on that, dollar figure. But when you just look at that pie, client paying $900 an hour, lawyer putting $200 or $250 in their pocket, that is an incredible amount of overhead and partner draws and just cost that the client's paying because they perceive it to be a low risk to use the, no one gets fired for buying IBM, as they say.
Right.
But the economics to me in that scenario never felt fair at all. And, really do benefit the rainmakers in the firm that have stuck around forever.
Right.
As opposed to really, creating a dynamic where the talent, the folks that are doing the hard work and driving the real value should get most of the reward. And that's, really what we try to structure.
You like flip the model on its head a little bit in terms of like the
from
value.
An economic perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's number one. Yeah.
Number two, you've touched on it, is that community, that peer network, that feeling that you can walk down the hall and knock on someone's door when you have a question or you want to spitball an idea. That to me was always one of the best features of the firm, was having those peers or those mentors around you that, you could look up to, but most importantly, you could go knock on the door and get some help when you needed it. And so providing that in a more decentralized way is another core part, and where I expect us to be doubling down in Q4 and into 2025, because not only have we seen how valuable that is for the lawyers in our network, it's so cheap and easy to do if we give it enough love and attention.
And so here's the part that I've always found with kind of traditional legal models, is that it has to be expensive and painful to equal good.
Yeah.
When I actually believe quite the opposite is equally as true, which is humans are just humans. And so there's like, got to make the right amount of money for my life for sure. I've got to do work that I feel, is impactful and fulfilling for sure. And then there's all of these human pieces around, like, I want to feel like I know this person that I'm referring work to, or they're referring work to me, or that I can get someone to see me for the struggle I'm going through because they've been through it and they can give me their perspective because they're one step ahead of me. Like, that part is just bringing humans together in a way that is efficient and easy for them to use. Like, if you use any sort of communication channel and you put 175 lawyers in there and you give different subtopics where they can be like, this is a referral question. This is like a fun thing. This is an advice piece. This is a mentor seeking channel. You can decentralize that from Victoria to St. John's.
100%.
And people feel the deep appreciation where they can take that into one-to-one conversations. They can do their own meetups. Good Lawyer is incredible about doing in-person meetups, and we're here in Vancouver about to do one of those incredible ones tonight for the Vancouver Good Lawyers. And I really think that these things don't need to be hard in order to be impactful.
No, they need to be thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I think, that was one of the big question marks starting this business at all was, can we adopt or learn from some of the best aspects of the big firm that we experienced, that both of us have experienced, and strip away some of the pieces that didn't feel fair or didn't feel necessary or felt incredibly constraining. And so how could we unravel that and then repackage it in a way where lawyers could have flexibility, they could have the business support they needed, they could have the community of peers that they're desperate for? Because as you said, one of the hardest parts about being a solo, like not to mention that if you're a solo lawyer or a small firm building a business, you're an entrepreneur building a business, and like that's hard.
Yes.
Being a good lawyer is hard.
Yeah.
And then doing it in a world where you feel really isolated and you don't have the easy sort of peer down the hall that you can go knock on the door on. And, we don't have a literal hall and a literal door, but the virtual one's pretty accessible.
Yeah.
And, that is a Slack channel that we started a long time ago because it felt like a good idea. And, is one of those things in the business, kind of like the name, that has stuck around forever. And I don't see it going anywhere because
for sure.
There's so much value that these lawyers get just from having that access to other good lawyers.
Yeah, totally. No, it's so powerful. Okay. Third one.
Number 3 would be, and you kind of touched on it too, but just giving them access to more tools. And that can be, the platform that Good Lawyer has built internally that helps us and the lawyers effectively manage ongoing and larger mandates. But it's also partnerships that we're able to strike with, folks like Thomson Reuters and, a lot of these new AI tools. And that's a huge list for me in Q4 is identifying, what we believe to be the best tool on the market, and then getting exceptional deals and being able to package those up for the lawyers so they don't have to think about it.
Yeah, that part is very difficult. Like even for me, I didn't start my own law firm, but after I left being a GC, I started my own business. And you have to think about all of this infrastructure you haven't thought about before in terms of like, you got to build a website. You got to think about invoicing tools. You got to integrate it. You got to figure out, we're using, podcast recording software right now. You got to like do the sourcing and the work, and then you got to pay for it. If you can be part of a community where the best in class products are sourced for you, the integration is already documented and explained easily for you, and you're with 170 other people in a community that have done it already. That makes it
doing it together.
That's right. So it feels safe. It feels, I know I will get there. And also you're getting it at a discounted rate because Good Lawyer has been able to acquire it at scale.
Purchasing power.
Yeah. It's like, I think it creates a much safer and softer landing for people that are feeling like maybe they're taking a big chance. Maybe it's very stressful. Maybe it's isolating. So I think it's beautiful. I think also too, maybe we should also just talk about one of the massive benefits. I have a 5-year-old and I think about this, which is there's so many great lawyers out there that don't want to or can't practice in the traditional models in a firm or full-time in a business. And
it's very all or nothing.
That's right. But you have all this talent who's like, for a variety of reasons, I can work 3 days a week or 4 days a week, or maybe they just only want to. Maybe they had a nice exit. Maybe there's some other reasons. They've got childcare, elder care. They want to live in a different place. That flexibility to work with really great companies in a way that suits your life.
Yeah.
I mean, you must hear this all the time from lawyers about how powerful that is.
It is, man. And that's like the needle that we've been trying to thread for a really long time. And one of the most, I wouldn't say unexpected, but I'd say the degree was a little bit unexpected when it came to fractional and how game changing that was for lawyers. When we were doing just the fixed fee services for, the smaller businesses, it was really nice to have for lawyers. because it could supplement, whatever else they were doing. But being able to lock them into, day a week, 2 day a week, these larger mandates and stack a few of those where it is from a financial perspective incredibly lucrative for these lawyers, and they're making like well into the 6 figures and making like real money that they can like live and support their family on. And again, that kind of goes back to the first thing that we were talking about the economics, but being able to thread that needle where you can provide the economic and business support, the community and mentorship support, and the technology tools that are getting more powerful by the day, much in the same way as a big firm would for these lawyers, but provide it such that the lawyer can sort of be as much or as little involved as they want to be, and just provide this sort of, I think, unmatched level of flexibility. And, even compared to some of the more modern looking law firms that might have a more fractional leaning type of business, because, we're not the only ones doing it, certainly not in North America. And don't quote me on this, but we might be the only non-exclusive one. And that has been another, I think, key sort of strategic decision on our part. We could make lawyers, if they're coming to hang out in Good Lawyer land, like, you're exclusive here, you can't be doing anything else. Or certainly not for anyone that kind of looks like us. But from my perspective, I never wanted to do that, because I want you to be here.
Yeah, you want them to choose it
every day. I want you to choose it every day. I don't want to lock you in. If you're on a mandate, you will be locked in for a period of time. But that's,
but that was their choice to be locked in on that mandate. And they could do a mandate off the platform in their own life if they have a best friend that wants them to do some work.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think, that is ultimately another huge differentiator about Good Lawyer is we want you to choose us every day. We want you as a lawyer to, get value every day out of your relationship with Good Lawyer. And if it's not working for you, no sweat.
It's the kind of the best type of human relationship too, where like, if you think about even like a couple or close friends, where it's like, you don't want people to be there purely because they feel obligated to be there. You want people to be like, every single day, I am choosing to give capacity and energy to this place. Because the big unlock, I really feel like for, Good Lawyer is the lawyers that are in the platform are waving the flag that they're part of Good Lawyer. I mean, when every lawyer in Good Lawyer is doing that, then the lawyer experience is just so tight. And that is so powerful, because then you get, I call this like human scale. Then you get not just Good Lawyer explaining the benefits to lawyers, you get those lawyers explaining the benefits to their peers. So when their peers say, but like, I don't understand how you're taking a month off to go live here, or I don't understand how you're able to pick your kid up every day, that person's going to start explaining, well, I work with Good Lawyer and I only work 3 days a week, or the way that I structure my 5 days a week is to end earlier. That's the way I set up my work. And people are going to say, how do you do that? And they're going to explain the amount of money that they make. And that, then you have scale. You have decentralized scale to grab the best talent. And I think that what you're so right on is, if you can build it at the core so that people feel that, they'll do the selling for you to the talent to bring them into Good Lawyer, which I always think is the best way.
Oh, 100%. And, for us, it's been, I always kind of describe it as this credibility march. And you can start the credibility march when Brett's the only Good Lawyer. Again, those are dark days. And just this credibility march over the last 5+ years, and getting to the moment where we are now, which is a little bit unbelievable to me at times. Some of the businesses we're working with, some of the lawyers that are coming inbound that want to be part of the network, truly like shocking to me.
They're like best in class
lawyers. Oh my God, man, like unbelievable. And it's because they've been looking for something that provided them with the flexibility to live the life that they wanted to, and wanted a career option that fit into that life, instead of what we mostly see in law, which is the career that your life gets jammed into.
Yeah. There's on that piece, there's something that, because I purchased fractional legal services as a GC. Good Lawyer wasn't really around at that time.
Sorry.
Yeah, it would have been better. But here's the biggest thing I think about the legal industry is that it's not the problem that we don't know. We know that the traditional model does not work for all lawyers, and we know the traditional model does not work well for all companies. We already know this.
Or all legal needs within a company.
That's right. And then we also know the solution is being provided now. Good Lawyer's doing it. And as you said, others have been or are doing versions of this. It's the bridge of education that I feel like for the legal industry is always the answer. Whereas I feel in other industries, you're like trying to really uncover the problem or trying to design a solution. We know these pieces. And so, when I think about the education about why doesn't every lawyer, law firm, general counsel, in-house lawyer, why don't they all know that fractional exists? Because they don't even all know that it is a possibility. And then two, when they know it, why don't they want to immediately join it and or buy it? I really feel like that's an education bridge that unlocks everything in terms of the growth. And so how have you been thinking about that education piece as being an unlock? Does that resonate for you?
Definitely. And, there's a reason that we've thrown a few yacht parties. And, does a yacht party correlate directly to educating CFOs and GCs across North America about this alternative fractional thing that can fill the gap between where you're using the big firm for milestone events and the need to hire, FTEs to be fully integrated and full-time with your team, which, as you know, are also like expensive and, a huge commitment. And there's this huge gap in the middle that, we're trying to play in. But getting the eyeballs, getting the attention is something that has come more naturally to me than some of the other aspects of the business. So leaning into that to get the eyeballs. Yeah. But then really, once you get the eyeballs, it's about driving insane value for the clients you have and treating, every new level as like this sacred opportunity to deliver. Yeah. Because you don't get a lot of shots in law. We're in an incredibly high trust environment. Credibility is paramount. And, your reputation takes years to build and can be lost in an instant. So, for us, building that reputation, establishing that credibility ultimately comes back to the lawyers that we're embedding inside of these businesses on a fractional basis. Yeah. And so ensuring that we're bringing in the right talent, making sure that we're structuring the right mandates, and then obsessing over, things like net promoter score and like truly understanding where we're falling off and where we're excelling and doubling down has been, incredibly challenging. But that is why I think, we're up another leg on the credibility march is just that consistent effort to drive value and make sure that anytime, excuse my French, we fuck up, that we rectify it to the best of our abilities and we don't do it again. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I think it's the biggest thing. I think the education and confidence piece for both lawyers joining the platform and companies buying from fractional legal services, I really feel like that's the unlock in this industry.
Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention, and this is actually, I'm going to steal a line that you said to me, which has been, another barrier that I think we're overcoming fairly quickly, is this idea that lawyers in our network are these others. Yeah. The other lawyers that couldn't hack it in BigLaw or couldn't hack it as a GC at the big company. And it's just so hilariously false. Yeah. And if you look at the resumes or the track records of these are lawyers that could work anywhere. Right. These are lawyers that could walk into partnership opportunities instantly because they could bring some insane clients with them, and the caliber of their expertise is off the charts. And so it is a little bit about, getting in front of that perception. Yeah. And that, comes back to, I would say less yacht parties. That's just to get the eyeballs and get people talking. It's about showcasing the talent and continuing to tell the stories of the lawyers that we're working with.
Yeah. And why they're doing it.
Exactly. The why is so important.
That's right. And I think what will help a little bit is that, with COVID and a mass decentralization and push to remote work, like people finally turned their brains to, we can work in different ways at least. And so it wouldn't be so shocking now as it might have been kind of in 2019. But I do think that this is why Pauline does fractional GC. She's got other businesses. She's got head of lawyer experience at Good Lawyer. Like she has a
Pauline on paper could walk into pretty much any firm on the country or, a plethora of in-house roles. And she chooses to do fractional and obviously work with us because, she's incredibly passionate about, driving a better lawyer experience across the industry. And she has, I would say, equally, if not sort of more intense feelings about the traditional model and why it's broken, especially for, women and lawyers of color that, don't look like me and maybe don't fit in as naturally. Although I can assure you I'm quite an odd duck in that world as well. Ever since I started calling lawyers painters in law school, they didn't like that very much. But it really comes back to not trying to replace anything that's happening right now, but to unlock one more option.
Yeah. It should be totally normal that lawyers get to work in a fractional way if they want to. And it should be totally normal that companies and legal teams get to purchase fractional lawyers, because in many circumstances, it's better for both of them. It fits their needs better. And so that would be my hope, is that like in this next phase, that just becomes a totally normalized career path for lawyers.
Exactly. And just a third option.
Yes.
That does come with it, more flexibility, still a ton of financial upside, more variability than a full-time in-house role, but also more intimacy and sort of integration deeply into the businesses than, if you're private practice and you have 100 clients.
Yeah.
And there still is definitely a huge amount of space for, the biggest firms in the country or the world for these, highly niche areas or these huge transactions or disputes where their leverage model and their vastness make tons of sense.
Yeah.
And obviously companies are going to continue to build their own in-house legal functions. And that makes a ton of sense as well. But there's still this huge gap between, do I need another FTE at this seniority level, whatever that looks like, or am I happy to be paying $900 an hour for someone that I still have to quarterback with because, Joe at the firm doesn't talk to Parker, the developer.
Right. Wouldn't know how to.
Bringing in a fractional product lawyer into your team who, maybe develops apps on the side because that's, his or her little side hustle or interest, does hang out with the developer, does hang out in the Slack channel, and does get so close to the metal in the business that not only can they provide way more cost-effective support, but they can actually provide the right expertise, the right advice, because they have all the context.
Yeah.
Just like an in-house lawyer would.
Right. Now, for sure. I want to ask you, do this in every interview, I want to ask you 3 rapid-fire questions, and we'll see how rapid-fire is.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a talker, but I'll try to keep them tight.
Okay, so the first one would be, your career, even though to you has always felt like you're following what made sense to you, to people looking at the outside in are seeing a massive shift from partnership track at a national law firm to going to grandma's basement and building this thing that's then taken on a life of its own. So if you were to look back though at younger Brett, or someone who's listening to this that's thinking, I wonder if it's, I wonder if I can bet on myself and do something different than what I was told that I'm going to do with my life. What advice would you give to someone who wants to do it, but is feeling too nervous to take that leap right now?
I mean, you are dead right. When I left the firm and had a few chats with, the partners I was close with, I need this. I think I could sort of sit beside them because they thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, Brett, go do this entrepreneurial thing, you lunatic. Do you see what's right in front of you?
Yeah.
Just down the road.
That's right.
Plots of gold and prestige. But I knew I was never really set on that, because kind of, as I think you touched on earlier, I wanted to build my dream, not someone else's dream. And the thing that I would say to my younger self, or folks that, are feeling a little bit stuck or unsure of, whether this law thing's for them or what they want to do next, I would say keep trucking, don't settle. Keep trucking, don't settle, because I think, if you have made it all the way and, you're a young lawyer and you're in the profession, you've already proved that you've got some pretty good chops. Mm-hmm. You're diligent, you're hardworking, you're smart. You can't get into this world without those boxes checked. And I think it's so sad that nearly half our profession exits our profession. There's no, I don't know the stats on the doctor side, but there's no way half of doctors stop being doctors, but almost half of lawyers stop being lawyers.
Right.
And for me, that is again, like this huge opportunity where maybe if there was this other option,
Right.
a lot of those folks would still be sticking around. But younger Brett or, young lawyer, entrepreneur coming up, the future of law is very bright, in my opinion. The need for lawyers is not going to disappear because of AI. I see the future being, less drudgery, but I think more,
maybe more impact.
More fulfilling. More fulfilling. That was the word I was looking for. More fulfilling. Getting to spend more time with your clients or
Agency.
Your peers in the business, and more opportunity to have a consequential impact on a business that you can see and touch and feel.
Yeah.
So keep trucking, because I think the future is incredibly bright, and don't settle. If you're unhappy, think about it. Don't be,
head in the sand.
Yeah, but don't settle, and just know that there are more and more opportunities that are coming up in our profession in this world, and that I think that there's never been a better time to go to law school and to be a lawyer, because I think that the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is going to be a total highlight reel for our profession.
Yeah, I think about, the 4 words that really changed the way that I think, that you kind of took that line around 4 years ago, is like, for you and for me. And when I think about for you and for me, it's like, if someone said like, oh, you should be a lawyer or you should never be a lawyer. If you put in your mind when someone tells you that, okay, for you. And then if you think, for me, how do I want to practice law? It like detaches someone else's definition of the profession from what yours can be. Because what I think the problem is when you feel very tied to someone else's definition, you either have to accept it or run from it. And that's what I think you're talking about with the 50-50 split of lawyers being in it, maybe happy, maybe not, and the other 50% not doing it. I think if we brought in this, for you, that's how you want to practice. And for me, I want to practice in this other way. And I think what you're giving people is the for me, another way.
Yeah, and I think your note on agency, right? Like, my recommendation around agency can be extended beyond lawyers. It can be extended to like everyone should be like the primary driver of the life they want to live. And I feel like that, risk adverse nature, the prestige that comes with, certainly being in like the big firms and that kind of thing. Folks feel like they've made it and that they can't give it up because it's so terrifying and, socially bad.
Yeah, the stigma.
Yeah, exactly. That they just like settle and stay.
Yeah.
Or, take it the full other sort of swing and just quit entirely.
Right.
And I just think that it's sad to see like these incredibly talented professionals miserable in a situation that like they never really signed up for. They just kind of got stuck in the river and kept flowing along. Or they give up entirely because they just can't see a world where they can find something that fits, that's something, a little bit more in the middle.
Yeah. Okay, question 2.
That was a long answer, but on to number 2.
Rapidly on this.
Yeah.
Okay, question 2. What if someone's listening to this thinking, I'm not really sure if an atypical career path is going to make sense for me, something like Good Lawyers, atypical. What is something that you think lawyers who might want to think about joining a platform like Good Lawyer, what is the most important thing that they would need to know from an education perspective to get them over this hurdle and say, okay, it might not be the path I was told I was going to take, but it's a darn good path? What would you want those folks to know?
I want them to know who Pauline is and have a conversation with her. I think she's such an incredible flag bearer for a lawyer, and, can also connect any of these lawyers with other folks in our network that, have been probably down a very similar path as, these hypothetical lawyers you're talking about. And so I would just say, talk to some good lawyers, talk to a Pauline, talk to you, reach out to me.
talk to us and have a conversation. And if it sounds nice and worth further exploration, then keep exploring. If it doesn't, then no problem. But open their eyes and have conversations. That would be my simple advice.
It's funny because, that actually plays out in a lot of conversations I have with like coaching work that I'm doing with individual lawyers is if I feel like they don't want to be in the traditional model, I'll tell them like, here's a third option and it looks like this. And almost every time that, I give them this opportunity, they reach out to, Pauline or Josh or whoever it is at Good Lawyer to learn more about it. And many of them have even now are in the platform because they said like,
that's why we love you, buddy.
Well, I want lawyers to have the option and I want them to be able to explore it. So I think it's beautiful that the offer is
being a lawyer should be awesome.
Yeah.
Too often it is sad or, overly stressful and like there's so many mental health issues in our profession. And like being a lawyer, like should be lucrative, in a lot of instances. And that is core to the lawyers in our network that we, can make them a great living working with us. But being a lawyer should be fucking awesome. And you should have the ability. We push words around the internet. Why do you need to be in a suit and a tie in an office with a closed door like I used to be to do that? Why do I need to work 80 hours to make a good salary? What if I'm comfortable working 30 hours because I got some kids that I want to raise or I got a mom that I got to take care of or frankly, I just want to go and hang out in Portugal for a while. Like, why can't I do that? I push words around the internet. I talk on the phone. I advise people with my expertise, and that should provide a level of freedom way more akin to being like a traditional creator than a traditional lawyer.
Yeah, that's cool. And maybe the title of this episode is coming out of lawyers that should be awesome to be a lawyer. Maybe it'll be something like that. Okay, last one.
Yeah.
When, you're thinking about, we've had a lot of conversations about the industry and just, very like similar kind of journeys. So we've had a lot of interesting conversations over the last like 6 months, especially. But what is something that we haven't talked about today or we haven't talked about in the past that you have wondered either what I thought about it or wondered where that conversation would go? Is there something on your mind where you're like, we just haven't talked about that or we should have?
I feel like we've touched on so many things. But one that instantly jumps out is, I would love to hear sort of Chad's thoughts on, 5 years out, both like, where do you see yourself and the impact that you want to have? And where do you see, 5-10 years out, what does the profession look like? How is it different? And, how are you making an impact on that?
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that. So I think there's two things, there's kind of the personal and the professional, and they're very intertwined for me right now. Like number one is, got partner is the most important relationship in my life. Got a daughter who's also the most important relationship in my life. And those things are the hub of me now. Like that's solid. And when that's solid, then everything else is possible. And so the way that I've kind of discovered about how do you make really important relationships solid is you have to have some cognitive capacity for it. Because even if you just have time, if you're not there, if you're not focused, if you don't have the energy, it's not it, actually. It's not about the quantum of time. It is about the cognitive focus and energy and emotional kind of connection. And so that for me is like when I think about this next phase of my life, like that is so foundational because it's the biggest part of my personal life, but it also allows me to have the energy to do what I want to do professionally, which is if in 5 years from now, there are hundreds of lawyers, maybe thousands of lawyers in North America, across the world, that have some level of association with me to opening a career path for them that is very impactful and very fulfilling and kind of brought a light to their lawyer life that they just did not even think was possible, then I will close my eyes for the long sleep in peace. Because for me, it should be real, it should be impactful, it should be fulfilling. And I really do believe it's possible. And I think it is the combination of bringing inspiration plus tools and process to just educate. And so for me, if there's like an education journey that I just want to bring to the legal industry about this should be possible for you as a lawyer. And as someone who's buying legal services, this should be equally possible for you.
Totally.
That's the future of law for me. But I'm curious for you though.
And I think, where I love business so much. And like, I love
the 4D chess game that it feels like we're playing all the time. Whereas I feel like, and you know, I grew up in a house full of psychologists. I love people, but I think that you were empathetic in like a deeper way than, you know, my slightly autistic or ADHD brain can like handle. And, you know, for me, I love building the platform that can help facilitate this new option, this new career path for lawyers, and like really try to like fix some of the aspects of the profession that I felt were disjointed from my experience. But for me, it really is about how do we build this business that can like facilitate that versus I think what I'm hearing from you is like that personal level, that like personal touch and impact that you could have with like literal human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that feels like, you know, certainly an area that is going to become more and more and more important within the good lawyer context. And I think, you know, more broadly speaking, some of these more modern or future of law oriented organizations and platforms that are trying to do that. So, you know, I would also add that hopefully in 5 years, you have a good lawyer tattoo on your body somewhere.
Well, listen, before we go, you brought up the future of law, so we definitely got to talk about this. We've got the Future of Law Summit, November 21.
Hosted by you.
And Pauline Chan. We brought together some of the most exciting and thoughtful legal industry voices from around the world. And this is kind of...
And this guy. If you're watching the video, Guy Kawasaki doing a keynote. What's the keynote called, Chad?
How to be a remarkable lawyer.
How to be a remarkable lawyer.
Guy Kawasaki, you know, chief evangelist at Canva, former chief evangelist at Apple. You know, the guy knows what it takes to be remarkable, and he's going to talk to lawyers about how to be a remarkable lawyer. So we're going to have all these wonderful voices. And here's the things that I love about it the most when you and I start talking about designing this is I love in-person stuff. Good Lawyer's amazing at it. We're here in Vancouver. We're about to do an incredible in-person event. Amazing. The challenge with in-person is you got to be there in person, and not everyone can get there or be there. And so what we did with this one is we wanted to make it zero barrier. So it's virtual. It's no cost.
It's free.
And there's going to be CLE because we know lawyers got to get those CLE hours. And so we just wanted to bring to lawyers a how-to style of event. 4 or 5 hours, you're going to hear from the folks that you know and love, especially if you're on LinkedIn, some of the biggest, most exciting voices there that are going to make it fun to not just talk about an idea, but teach you how to do it. From using AI to building your brand, to finding your people, they're going to tell you how they've done it. And these folks have all done it over the last few years. And so it is top of mind for them to give you practical tools while making it fun. And so we hope that everyone that's listening, that's watching, you know, that sees it on LinkedIn, it's free, it's virtual, it's going to be, you know,
it's going to be
fun.
epic. Yeah. Get the popcorn. It's going to be an afternoon where you get to pick up 4 hours of CLE. So you don't have to stress about that because you got enough on your plate.
Right.
And they go to summit.goodlawyer.ca. I am pretty sure because Chad is on top of everything. It's going to be in the show notes, but summit.goodlawyer.ca, folks, November 21st. Would love to see as many good lawyers from across Canada, North America, the world at this virtual event. And, you know, I think it's going to be pretty special.
Well, I mean, we've just opened it up. There's only barely been talking about it. There's already 650 people that have registered for it. There's going to be thousands.
We're just getting started.
So, you know, look out for that. We hope to see you there. Hope to connect with you there. Listen, man, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for taking a bet on yourself to build something that is for the betterment of the industry and the betterment for lawyers. And it's not easy to go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, especially when you're walking away from something big. It resonates deeply with me. So, you know, wanted to say appreciate you for that, for sharing the time here, and for, you know, having these collaborations together that only have more to come. So appreciate you, man.
You know, I'll just sign off with, I think, you know, if you want to be great at anything, and certainly in this world of, you know, being a founder and trying to build something that didn't exist before, you need to, you know, eat that humble pie every morning and just be a voracious learner. And, you know, that's what I wake up and remind myself every day is I don't know shit. And I need to keep learning every day. The folks around me on my team, we all got to keep learning and, you know, just trying to find the answer every day, keep showing up
And, I think you're a great example of someone who has come into my life, has come into the Good Lawyer universe, and just oozes information and insights that, I keep picking up, whether you even realize it or not. So, man, hats off to you. I appreciate every one of our engagements, and, look forward to seeing what the future holds for Chad and Good Lawyer. So thanks again.
Appreciate it, brother. To everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.
Summit.goodlawyer.ca, folks. We'll see you there. Cheers.
That's a wrap.